You wake up tomorrow morning. The alarm goes off, and before you even open your eyes, a familiar negotiation begins. 5 more minutes. I'll start fresh tomorrow. I'm tired. I deserve this. Here is what I want you to understand before anything else. Marcus Aurelius had that same argument every single morning. He was the most powerful man alive, commander of the largest military force on earth, philosopher-king. And at the start of Book 5 of his Meditations, his private journal, never meant to be read by anyone, he wrote down the exact same excuse you just made. In the morning when you rise unwillingly, he begins. Unwillingly. The Roman emperor is writing himself a note about not wanting to get out of bed. And here's the thing, that word matters. He didn't write it for posterity. He wrote it because he needed to hear it. This isn't a story about discipline. It is a story about the war inside your mind before 7 a.m. and the 3-minute system one man used to win that war for 19 years running. Most people think the hard part is the habit. Get up earlier, journal more, meditate, do the cold shower. The habit. But if you look closely at what Marcus actually wrote, not the inspirational quote versions, the raw stuff, you see something different. He wasn't trying to eliminate the resistance. He was feeding it. Book 5 opens with him arguing with himself. Literally mid-argument, on the page. It's very pleasant to sleep, he writes, and then he pivots. Were you born for pleasure or for action? Not push through. Not get over it. He picks up the self-pity and uses it like a diagnostic instrument. What does my reluctance tell me about what I actually believe? And then he gets up. This distinction is everything. You've been taught to suppress the resistance. He weaponized it. But here's what nobody in the 4 a.m. hustle content ever tells you about Marcus Aurelius. The morning ritual wasn't in the morning. It started the night before. Book 2 of the Meditations reads like a court proceeding. Marcus is both prosecutor and defendant. He isn't asking whether he accomplished his tasks. He is asking sharper, more uncomfortable questions. Did I behave with integrity? Did I give way to anger when I claimed I wouldn't? Did I tell myself a story about someone's behavior instead of looking at the facts? Every night, an audit. Not of his schedule, of his character. This is where the retention cliff is in your own life. Not in the morning, when you're still half asleep and making deals with yourself. The morning is already decided by what you did the night before. What you rehearsed, what you examined, what you left unexamined. That's what wakes up with you. And now here's the part that should bother you. Modern neuroscience has confirmed, in precise detail, exactly why Marcus's system worked. Expressive writing in the morning, the exact practice he was doing, reduces cortisol levels by up to 23%. Cortisol, the stress hormone that forces your brain into threat scanning instead of intentional thought. Every decision you make inside elevated cortisol is a decision made by an animal trying to survive, not a human being trying to think. But that's only half of it. Metacognitive journaling, writing specifically about your own thought patterns, activates the prefrontal cortex and quiets the default mode network. The default mode network is the part of your brain that runs its own show when you're not paying attention. It's where rumination lives, where old resentments replay on a loop, where the story you tell about yourself calcifies into the person you become. Marcus didn't have a brain scanner, but every morning he was performing the exact cognitive operation that rewires it. He was doing in 170 AD what neuroscientists in 2024 are still arguing about. You have access to that research right now. You have the studies, the data, every productivity app ever built to make it frictionless. And most mornings you still pick up your phone first. There is a line in Naj al-Balagha, the collected words of Imam Ali, that translates as, "Call yourself to account before you are called to account." A sentence from the 7th century. And it names the same psychological architecture Marcus was building every night. A daily reckoning, self-imposed, before the world imposes its own version. Not as punishment, as calibration. The man who examines himself in private doesn't need the world to break him open. He has already done the work. What strikes me about these two traditions, separated by 5 centuries and an entire civilizational distance, is that they arrived at the same conclusion independently. The examined life is not a philosophical luxury. It is a structural requirement for functioning with integrity in the world. And both Marcus and Imam Ali arrived there not through abstraction, but through the daily grind of holding positions of enormous consequence and needing a way to not lose themselves inside them. In a moment, I'll give you the exact 3-minute method, drawn directly from what Marcus actually wrote, that you can run tomorrow morning before you touch your phone. But first, the piece most people skip. The point of this practice is not to make you feel good about yourself. Marcus never used his journal to confirm what a fine job he was doing. He used it to find where he had failed and to hold that failure clearly, without excuse and without drama. The Stoics called this prosoke, attention to self, not self-obsession, not self-promotion, the quiet, unflinching act of seeing yourself accurately. That is the entire method. The 3 questions are just the structure that makes it repeatable. Question 1. What kind of person did I show up as yesterday? Not what you accomplished. Not what's on the schedule today. Who were you? Were you the version of yourself you intended to be, or the reactive one, the impatient one, the one who took the easy exit when the moment required something harder? 1 sentence. Honest. No context, no mitigating circumstances. Question 2. What will I refuse today? Marcus used his mornings to preload resistance to his predictable failures. He knew he would meet people who frustrated him. He knew he would be pulled toward pettiness, toward complaint, toward the kind of anger he would regret by evening. He named those pulls in advance and decided, before encountering them, that they would not move him. 1 thing. Name it now. Decide now, while you're clear, before the day gives you reasons to forget. Question 3. What is actually required of me? Not what you want. Not what would be comfortable. What is required by your responsibilities, your relationships, your own stated values? This is the question that ends the negotiation with yourself. Because when you've said out loud what the morning is actually for, the 5 more minutes argument loses its grip entirely. You're not getting up because you feel motivated. You're getting up because you know what is required, and you are choosing to be the person who does it. Here is the harsh truth underneath all of this. Marcus Aurelius ran this practice while managing a decade-long plague, a war on 3 simultaneous borders, a co-emperor who could not be relied upon, and the weight of 40 million people's survival resting on his judgment. He didn't have a morning routine app. He didn't have a course. He had a notebook, a candle, and a ruthless honesty about the gap between who he was and who he needed to be. You have everything he didn't. The only question is whether you're using it, or using it to avoid the one thing he actually did. Examine yourself, not to perform discipline for an audience, not to tick a habit tracker, but because the life you want begins with the version of you who can look clearly at the version you are now and refuse to lie about the distance between them. If any of this is touching something deeper, persistent anxiety, burnout, an avoidance pattern you can't seem to break, talking to a therapist isn't weakness. It's the most rational move available to you. If this shifted something, subscribe. 1 video a week. No motivation content. Direct truth, ancient and modern, aimed at the part of you that already knows what it needs to do. And tell me in the comments, which of those 3 questions is the one you're most afraid to answer honestly? Because I guarantee that's the one you need most.